what I want to do most of all in each of the lectures that I give to you on the angels is to make sure you feel comfortable about talking to angels, praying to them because they hear our prayers and answer them as emissaries of God, and that you do not feel that it is somehow awkward to address an angel. So, you want to contact your higher self. Is there anybody here who doesn't want to contact your higher self? So it's Joe Field who's going to help us do this. You want this to happen. You don't need flowery language. You don't need a long, sonorous prayer. You simply need to say, beloved. We address the angels as beloved because they are the beloved of God, and it is a term of respect and devotion. Beloved Archangel Jophiel and Christine and legions of light, I need your help. Come to me now. Help me. Help my soul to make contact with my higher self. I want to commune with that part of me. I want to become my higher self here on earth. I want to be able to do those greater things that Jesus promised me I would do because he is in the heart of the Father. Oh, Jophiel and Christine, correct me, reprove me, show me what is acceptable and not acceptable in the sight of God. Teach me the way. I am but a child. I would learn. I would listen. Come into my house. Help my children. Help my marriage. Help my family. Help me in finding the job I need to support myself and those who depend on me. This is the way you talk to angels. It's the way you talk to God. It is a prayer of the heart. Your heart is on fire with the love you have for God and his angels, and on fire with the desire to truly walk in the shadow of the Almighty. Archangel Jophiel and Christine are teachers of mankind. Their legions of angels are teaching you every day. The thoughts of angels pass so easily into our minds that we say, I have an idea. We are so accustomed to saying to ourselves that our ideas are our own. Have you ever taken a step backwards and out of yourself and just observed your mind? You observe your mind when you get an idea. One moment, you didn't have a thought in your head about how you were going to do anything, and the next moment, there's the idea, there's the plan, there's the blueprint. Inventors invent. People figure out how to do things. I'm always in awe of the mind of God. The brain, of course, is a magnificent instrument, but I see it as a chalice, and the central nervous system, and the subconscious, and the unconscious, all different chalices that we have as receptors of the intelligence of the mind of God, and of course, including the spiritual chakras. How many of the ideas we get that set us sailing in our careers and enable us to be successful, how many of those ideas really originate in the human brain, and how many of them really come from the higher mind, from the God presence, from the universal intelligence? I am continuously humbled before the intimations of God that I receive and people receive that simply, in my mind, could not have come forth from myself, but are truly a gift. And so when we work with the angels of the second ray, that is what we are working with, to actually become totally bonded to the higher self, so that the Christ presence in the center of the chart is no longer above you, but fully integrated with you here below. And that is the nature of the great avatars of all ages. Jesus Christ was fully the manifestation of the Son of God, the incarnation. He set the example and the pattern of what all could do. So quickening our capacity to attune with the universal mind of God is what we are about today. And it's the job of the angels of the second ray of wisdom and enlightenment to rescue the world from ignorance, ignorance of the laws of God, ignorance of their own true identity in God. The sages of East and West define ignorance as blindness to the true nature of the real self and the unreal self. Gautama Buddha taught that ignorance of one's true nature causes inordinate desire, which is the basis of all suffering, and the reason why we keep on coming back to the earth, why we keep on reincarnating. The texts of Hinduism teach that the origin of pain is ignorance, and that it will not cease until ignorance is entirely dispelled. You know, we never know just how ignorant we are until we gain just a little bit more enlightenment, and then we look back and say to ourselves, gee, I was really dumb. And then we get to the next level and we look back and we weren't too bright then either. So each day is kind of a proving of what really is the wisdom of God and what is the education of man. So the origin of pain being ignorance, it will not cease until ignorance is entirely dispelled, and we will not know when it is entirely dispelled except from the standpoint of our own enlightenment. You will accomplish this when you realize your true self to be Brahman. Hindu scriptures teach us that within our heart is the Atman, and the Atman is like a miniature replica of God, who is Brahman with the word in the beginning. So we think of that real self, that middle figure in the chart, as above us, but also in the heart there is a threefold flame. There is the Christ presence, and there is the voice of that inner presence speaking to you. Remember, Christ is not a Christian word. It just is a Greek word that means one who is anointed with light. So the one who is anointed with light within you is your true self. Jophiel and Christine and the angels of wisdom teach you how to contact your higher self. Jophiel says that you need to educate the heart, the mind, and then the soul. He says, think of the ancients who walked the earth and knew the thoughts of God when God thought them. In our time, the goal of education on earth has been to accelerate the computer of the mental body. Direct communication with God through the threefold flame of the heart chakra is wanting. Yet without the discriminating intelligence of the higher self, man is little more than a computer, a flesh and body machine. That's why from the hour of conception, parents must begin and continue the ritual of the education of the heart, the mind, and the soul. Then man will realize his potential to become a son of God. Archangel Jophiel is specifically concerned about the deplorable state of education in the United States. His angels are relentless in their warfare against ignorance, mental density, and mediocrity, as these affect the minds of educators and students and lower the standards of institutions of learning. He says that these negative attitudes detract from the crispness of the Christ qualities that belong to and are the inheritance of the children of the sun. Your call to Jophiel and his legions compels their answer. This is the law of God. Angels were created by God to be our caretakers. When we call to them, and our call is according to the will of God, they are compelled to answer and to assist us. We don't always see the obvious answer, but in this way and that way and roundabout ways, we find things coming together in our lives. The Archeia Christine says, call to me to intercede before the cosmic Christ in your behalf, to release advanced teaching methods to the parents, teachers, and sponsors of youth. Will you not pray that the world teachers and the hierarchies of illumination might release to instructors in every field as well as to yourselves new and advanced methods of teaching all subjects? We have released methods through Maria Montessori and many other educators. There is so much more that we can deliver to those who will listen. Jophiel will teach you how you can commune with the mind of God and experience self-knowledge. The angels of wisdom are ready and waiting to help you, at your signal, absorb the elements of the mind of God. Archangel Jophiel once remarked, do you know that a single mind transformed by the mind of Christ is a catalyst for quickening the minds of the population of an entire planet? That is what the Christ incarnate, the Buddha incarnate, can do. As I said earlier, Paul said, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." Paul himself witnessed the mind of Jesus as being one with the mind of God. Many Christians believe they cannot be like Jesus. Jesus was and is the greatest rabbi who ever lived. He is telling you today that you can have the mind of Christ. You can have the mind of Buddha. You can have the mind of God. He guarantees that you can have that mind. But if you don't believe it, if you've accepted the lie of Satan that you are a condemned sinner and have no right to walk and talk with Jesus as your friend and brother and rabbi, then your own self-appraisal will deprive you of your ownership of that mind. As Jesus said 2,000 years ago, so he says today, "Everything I have done, you can do. You can do everything I have done and more, because through your holy Christ self, you have the same connection to God that I do." And this is what Jesus said that is recorded in Scripture. "He that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father." The angels of illumination, of course, work under the command of Jesus Christ, and therefore, when we seek to connect with our higher self, we seek to connect with Jesus because he is the full incarnation of that higher self. We all know the burdens upon our youth, from the smallest children to those in college today. They face challenges we had never had to face. Think of all the children nearest you in your extended family. Think of the children in your community, your city, and the children of the whole world. And offer this profound prayer to God and the profound desiring that you pour into this prayer for the bringing of our children to the heart of their own real self and their own true path. Together. Beloved Heavenly Father, beloved Heavenly Father, beloved Heavenly Father, take command of our youth today, blaze through them opportunity's ray, release perfection's mighty power, amplify cosmic intelligence each hour, protect, defend their God design, intensify intent divine. I am the power of infinite light, blazing through our youth, releasing cosmic proof, acceptable and right, the full power of cosmic light to every child and child man in America and the world. Beloved I am, beloved I am, beloved I am. When you feel burdened and you just don't know what to do or where to turn because children you love of any age are very burdened and perhaps going the way that does not seem right to you, pause a moment and give this little mantra 3 times, 9 times. With all the love of your heart, call to any of the 7 archangels, Jophiel and Christine. Call to God, the heart of Jesus, Kuthumi, Gautama, and pour your heart out to God and see what the return will be through God's ministering angels. You'd be interested to know, I think, that the December 1992 Ladies' Home Journal published this story of a heavenly being who helped a woman contact the mind of God through her higher self. Carol was at home with her children when suddenly her toddler slumped over. Her lips were turning blue from lack of oxygen. She grabbed the limp child and headed for the hallway. "Can't somebody help me?" Carol wasn't looking for divine intervention, just someone who knew first aid. But although there were usually plenty of people in the neighboring apartments, on this particular day in the spring of 1990, no one answered her cries. Suddenly, Carol felt a deep calm settle over her. "Relax," Carol said to herself. "You took a class in child safety last year. You know what to do." As her daughter Julie watched wide-eyed from the doorway, Carol laid Allison on the hall floor, leaned over her, and began mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. The child soon responded. "My terror just disappeared," Carol says. Something took over, and it was almost like I had stepped outside of myself. I could see myself doing what I had to do. That night, after the doctor had diagnosed Allison's illness as croup and the baby was sleeping peacefully, Julie crawled into her mother's lap. "Mommy," she asked quietly, "who was that man who had his hand on your shoulder?" "What man, honey?" Carol asked. "The man, Mommy. The man who had his hand on your shoulder while you were helping Allison breathe." The child's eyewitness account of the helper being a man rather than an angel allows us to conjecture that he could have been Carol's Holy Christ self, whom we call our chief guardian angel, or even an ascended master. I say this because children know that angels have wings and that men do not, and the child called him a man. So I think that when Carol says that something took over and she was standing outside of herself, that she is describing the overshadowing of that presence, that chief guardian angel, one with the mind of God. Lanto's prayer, that is next in the yellow pages, is a wonderful fiat to give. It may sound perhaps not too familiar because it combines the Eastern and Western traditions, but it is a very powerful prayer in time of need. Would you like to give it? It's number 15, page 5. In the name of Almighty God, I stand forth to challenge the night, to raise up the light, to focus the consciousness of Gautama Buddha. And I am the 1,000-petaled lotus flame, and I come to bear it in his name. I stand in life this hour, and I stand with the scepter of Christ's power, to challenge the darkness, to bring forth the light, to ensoul from starry heights the consciousness of angels, masters, Elohim, sun centers, and of all of life that is the I am presence of each one. I claim the victory in God's name. I claim the light of solar flame. I claim the light. I am the light. I am victory. I am victory. I am victory. For the Divine Mother and the Divine Man-Child, and for the raising up of the crown of life and the 12 starry focal points that rejoice to see the salvation of our God, right within my crown, right within the center of the sun of Alpha, it is done. Archangel Jophiel says that if you want to be in control of your life, then you must have access to the Christ mind. And to do that, you must walk the path of the imitation of Christ. When you hear yourself saying things you know Jesus wouldn't say, take note that you are far, far from your holy Christ self, as well as from Jesus. The Christ presence separates itself from human discord. It rises to heavenly octaves of spiritual harmony. When Peter was not in the right vibration, Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be ye far from me. Thou savorest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of men." He was telling Peter, you are far from me in vibration, therefore be far from me also, until you correct your vibration. By a pure and penitent heart, through prayer and violet flame decrees, you can reestablish your harmony with the flame of forgiveness and loving kindness, which you share with all. When you do that, the Christ presence draws nigh to you again. Don't condemn yourself when you make a mistake or you get angry. A state of condemnation is not a good vibration either, and you still are pushing away the Christ presence when you condemn yourself. There's nothing productive about self-condemnation. So pick yourself up, acknowledge that you did something wrong, now do something right to correct it and get on with your life. It is the fallen angels who plague us with self-condemnation, sometimes all the days of our lives, and it is totally unnecessary. Sometimes authoritarian parents have indoctrinated us with an absence of self-worth whereby we condemn ourselves. We need to get out of it and on with our life because we know that God is real in us. This is the law of octaves. As water seeks its own level, so angels and masters gravitate to higher realms. If you would be with them, you must accelerate your consciousness to their level through prayer and meditation. This is the key to making contact with your higher self. And the angels help you do this. Love is the key, harmony is the key, peace is the key, and understanding is the key. By the same process, you can draw your higher self, the angels and ascended masters, down to your level once you have reconsecrated your heart and soul and aura by your devotions. Jophiel advises us to pursue the path of the imitation of Christ. Speak as you know or believe Christ would speak, with love but firmness, sternness where required, mercy when it is due, soft spoken when needed, in the intensity of the sacred fire when you would awake a soul who does not want to be awakened. Speak as Christ would speak, and Christ will speak through you. Think as Christ would think, and Christ will think through you, and the mind of God will become congruent with the physical vessel. And there shall be no separation, as things equal to the same things are equal to each other, one Christ, one Lord, one manifestation in your temple. Many of you are familiar with this classic of Thomas à Kempis, The Imitation of Christ. It is the book you keep on your night table along with your Bible. You read a page a day or two, and you keep yourself in harmony with the path that is so beautifully outlined by this saint. Jesus and Kuthumi dictated this work. It's called Corona Class Lessons for Those Who Would Teach Men the Way. It gives their profound interpretation of Christian principles and doctrines according to the teachings of angels and Jesus and Kuthumi, who are world teachers. It helps you to make a transition from scripture and doctrine into the more universal awareness of the path of personal Christhood. There's a very wonderful section on sin and seeing through sin and getting past sin. It's just a wonderful little handbook on our path. Archangel Jophiel and Christine teach you to call upon their untold legions of angels to help you with the most minute details of your personal life, just as easily as you call upon them in matters of national and international crisis. Don't underestimate what the angels can and will do for you. Just try it out. Just prove that it's true, what I'm telling you. One of my students told me this story. When I was driving home with some fellow students after attending Summit University, my car developed a problem and began to seriously overheat. None of us had any more money to spare, and we were going home on a wing and a prayer, literally. Each time the needle started creeping up hotter and hotter, I would make fiery calls to the angels and nature spirits. I told the people in the car to hold the visualization and thought form of snow, of crystal clear, cold mountain streams and ice all around the whole engine. Then we would watch the needle immediately go right back down as the temperature dropped to normal. It was such a wonderful testimony to the power of the Word and the intercession of heavenly helpers. So visualization is very important. Simulation is important. Whatever it is that you need to put all of your attention and focus into that thought form. When you call in the name of God and Jesus Christ to an archangel to help you, he is bound by cosmic law to help you. The archangels do your bidding as long as your requests are keeping with the will of God, as I said, and then as long as you submit to that will. This is an example of an invocation. Beloved Archangel Jophiel and Christine, I ask you to lock the mind of God over every man, woman, and child over this planet, that we might see and know and be the living truth, that our leaders might give us true leadership, and that they might reach the right resolution of all problems facing the governments of the nations. Archangel Jophiel and Christine, we call to you and we accept it done right now in full power in answer to our call. When you make a call like that to Archangel Jophiel and Christine, accept that they have answered you instantaneously. In this case, I accept that they have locked the mind of God over every single person on earth. Now then, after the call comes free will. Some people will accept that mind. Some will be healed by it. Some will reject it. They may unconsciously reject it, or they may consciously reject it. Why do we make calls? Why do we have to call to angels? Why don't they just help us without our giving prayers and directions? The crux of the matter is that we exercised free will. We left the realms of perfection. Then we went forth out of the Garden of Eden, which is Maitreya's mystery school. And so we have said to God, we are not content to abide by your will. We are going to go through a period of experimentation, which has turned out to be many thousands of years, an experimentation of exercising the free will that you gave us in the beginning. So God gave us this physical universe, this planetary home, and other planetary homes for us to try our hand at free will. And he made a pact with us, and he said, you are now living in the footstool kingdom. It is your kingdom. You have chosen to run it. And so our angels will not interfere with your free will unless you ask them to. Unless you come to the place where you call for help and accept the will of God. This is how we explain why angels don't just take care of everything. Why they don't prevent every accident, every calamity, every war, every fire that happens, every child that gets killed unnecessarily, all of these things. Why doesn't God just stop it all? A lot of people use that logic as a rationale for being perpetually angry with God, because God let this happen, God let that happen, God let the next thing happen. But they don't understand karma and reincarnation. They don't understand that we are reaping our karma. And they don't understand that we have opted for freedom. We want that freedom more than anything else. And if we are going to accept God's will in our lives, well, maybe we'll just have to think about that for a little while and see whether that's going to be an intrusion on our plans. Seriously now, many people are afraid of the will of God. It could change your whole life around, and you're pretty comfortable where you are right now. Everything's kind of copacetic. It's at a point of equilibrium, etc. So that's why God did this, because God doesn't want us to be robots to him. He endowed us with the flame of himself. He put the image of himself as Atman in our hearts. He gave us an I am presence to be with us all times. He gave us that Christ or Buddhic presence. He gave us all things based on free will. We have the free will to snuff out that threefold flame. We can extinguish the flame of life by anger, tremendous, deep anger against God. You can blow out that threefold flame, and suddenly the temple is dark. There's no light, no inner light. So we make prayers to God because we want to be restored to the time before we went out from God's presence, because we have bumped around and bungled around for so very long that we've finally come to the conclusion. Some of us have come to that conclusion. I won't speak for you. But some of us have come to the conclusion that it's just no use trying it your own way with your own free will, because sooner or later things just don't go right. So you've decided to try God's will and to call for that will daily in your life, and to offer that prayer to God that wherever his will takes you, you will go. You will follow that will wherever it takes you, and you will maintain a listening ear to obey the inner voice of God. So that is a wonderful relationship to be in with the angels and with God. So because we are in the footstool kingdom, and the rule here is we all have free will, if we want intercession, if we want the divine presence in our lives, we have to pray for it. And when we do so, we have to be sincere, and we have to go along with the answer. So this is why, since yesterday evening, I've been talking to you about how you pray to God, how you pray to angels. Because you are sons and daughters of God, you can command angels. And in the prayer that I just gave, it's an example of prayers I give often. I make sweeping calls so that I am giving the authority on behalf of my own heart and my own Christ presence to the angels, as I said here, to lock the mind of God over every man, woman, and child on this planet. And they will do that, and that's a big assignment. It takes millions of angels to do that. The idea is to keep the angels busy because they are our caretakers. They want to help us. They want to do the works of God. So we need to make calls daily. If you see an accident happening, you call to the angels immediately to take command. But you don't stop there. You maximize the call. You say, and in addition, beloved angels, you tend to every accident and situation on planet Earth today where someone's life is hanging in the balance. It only took you a few seconds more to add that on. But now you've engaged millions of angels and authorized them because you are in embodiment, you are in the earth, and you have asked for their intercession, whereas many millions of people do not know how to ask for the intercession of angels. So you are offering prayers on behalf of many, many people who are suffering and yet know not this particular teaching on intercession. So when you make that kind of a call and the angels perform the action, then you do come into free will. And as soon as an individual for whom they have given a portion of the mind of God says, I don't want that mind, it's interfering with my life, it is simply withdrawn from them, because the angels will never, never interfere with free will.
You're watching Elizabeth Clare Prophet, world-renowned author and founder of Summit University. Summit University is located at the beautiful Royal Teton Ranch in Park County, Montana, just north of Yellowstone National Park. If you'd like more information, call 1-800-245-5445. That's 1-800-245-5445.
Another thing that the Archeia Christine tells you is that you are absolutely not limited to what is considered the norm of mental capacity. She says that you've been brainwashed to believe that only the privileged few can have a superior intellect. What a tragedy it is, she says, that people limit children's mental capacity by the IQ test. Because people accept this limit to brain development, the angels of illumination cannot inspire their minds with the capacity of the higher mind or the Christ mind. Why? Well, although brain matter will respond, the human consciousness in its sense of limitation does not respond. It puts a cap by its own thinking on its own capacity for intelligence. When this happens, Christine says, the human consciousness is not an open door. People just don't believe that once they've become adults, they can actually increase their mental capacity. It does not perceive, hence it does not receive. That human consciousness does not perceive, so it doesn't receive. Christine says people use only 1/10 of their mental capacity. But all of this will change when you call to the angels of wisdom and enlightenment to help you and the entire population of planet Earth come up higher. Yes, come up higher to their own higher consciousness. Christine says that illumination's golden flame has the power to mold your brain, to raise you to a level where you are using first 20, then 30, 40, 50% of your capacity, and finally 100% of the raw material you had when you were born. Think of that. I'd like to tell you a story now about an encounter that a communist youth leader once had with what could have been an angel of wisdom. The youth was Sergei Kordakov. Sergei was born in March 1951 in the former Soviet Union. He lost his parents when he was a child. From the age of 6, he lived in children's homes operated by the state. At 7 years of age, he became active in communist youth organizations. In his book, The Persecutor, he tells of attending classes where the teacher would say, "Good morning, children. How are you today? Remember, there is no God. By the time he was a teenager, he was thoroughly indoctrinated with Marxist-Leninist principles. Sergei's exceptional leadership abilities quickly brought him to the attention of the KGB. When Sergei was 18, the KGB chose him for the special police work of raiding Christian prayer meetings and beating, arresting so-called believers. Over a period of 2 years, Sergei led more than 150 raids. During his last raid, he had an experience that completely changed his life. He spotted an old woman who was fervently praying for the forgiveness and conversion of her attackers. As he lowered his club to strike her, someone seized hold of his wrist so tightly that it pained him. He turned around to hit the one restraining him, but no one was there. Sergei was so stunned that he dropped his club and ran crying from the scene. In his book, Sergei doesn't attempt to identify the unseen presence that restrained him, but he never again persecuted Christians. In 1971, he escaped to Canada from a Soviet naval ship. He devoted his new life to exposing the plight of Russian Christians until his accidental death by gunshot in 1973. He was 21 years old. It really is an astonishing story. I know that power of the restraining arm of God. I've seen it upon people who were in an ultimate state of anger, and I've seen them become powerless by that presence of an angel. It's really an amazing thing, number one, to feel the power of an angel that does not allow you to move, and to see how it is so tangible and so physical. Next, I have to give you a supreme example of what can happen when an archangel like Jophiel makes a fiat and we respond and work hand in glove with the angels. In 1963, Archangel Jophiel spoke through my late husband and teacher, Mark Prophet, who was also my twin flame. And he told us that nicotine affects the functioning of the brain, the heart, the lungs, and the central nervous system. He said that if people would break the smoking habit, they could receive a greater flow of spiritual illumination. What happened following this is the major turnaround that we have had in cigarette smoking in America. In 1988, Surgeon General's report on the health consequences of smoking said, nicotine exposure in long-term tobacco users is substantial, affecting many organ systems. Nicotine that enters the blood is rapidly distributed to the brain. Once in the brain, it alters brain energy metabolism. Nicotine and smoking exert effects on nearly all components of the endocrine and neuroendocrine systems. With regular use, levels of nicotine accumulate in the body during the day and persist overnight. Thus, daily tobacco users are exposed to the effects of nicotine for 24 hours each day. End of quote. As you all know, cigarette smoking is a major cause of death in the United States. Smoking tobacco products is the primary avoidable cause of death in America. Approximately 400,000 deaths in the United States each year are linked to smoking. This is more than the number of deaths caused by alcohol and other drugs combined. There are some 4,000 chemicals in cigarette smoke. Several of these are known as carcinogens. Smoking increases the incidence of heart disease as well as cancer in the lungs, larynx, esophagus, bladder, pancreas, and kidneys. Smoking during pregnancy increases the risks of spontaneous abortion and infant deaths. Former addicts and alcoholics say that tobacco is a tougher habit to kick than heroin or alcohol. Jophiel announced in 1963 that the Lords of Karma would in due course take action against those who have trafficked in tobacco and nicotine, causing the untimely death of millions. He said that karmic law would require the tobacco companies to pay to the last farthing the burden they had imposed upon the youth of America and the world by promoting the smoking habit. Archangel Jophiel spoke directly to those addicted to nicotine and told them that nicotine creates a density in the brain, preventing the divine intelligence from flashing forth through the receptacles of the brain. When people set aside the smoking habit, they will find that this will increase the flow of spiritual illumination to them through the brain and central nervous system, said Joe Field. He said that the lords of the tobacco industry have sold their souls for a mess of pottage, and they will have to re-embody to balance every jot and tittle of their karma. Joe Field said, "The great law requires it, and let none think that they can escape, for it is not the intent of the karmic law to permit them to escape until they have paid every last farthing of that which they have imposed upon the youth of America and the world by creating those vicious and pernicious habits which distort the consciousness and warp the power of the great God flame in its action to the force field of mankind." End of quote. We can see from all of our studying of Joe Field today why he would be so concerned, because he cannot bring about the enlightenment of people when their brains are coated with nicotine and these 4,000 chemicals that are in tobacco. So the brain is no longer a receptacle of light, and he sees people who have light, who are servants of the light, who are so overcome by the smoking habit that effectively he can no longer reach them in this lifetime because of what tobacco and nicotine have done to the brain. So this archangel decided to make it his crusade and the crusade of all of his angels. As a result of Archangel Joe Field's dictation, cigarette smoking came under the scrutiny of the United States government. 4 months after Joe Field's pronouncement, the Public Health Service released a report that linked cigarette smoking to cancer. The federal government also began to restrict advertising by the tobacco industry. In 1965, federal legislation required that all cigarette advertising and packaging carry a warning label from the Surgeon General about the health effects of smoking. In 1970, a federal law banned all tobacco ads from television and radio. In 1987, smoking was prohibited on domestic airline flights of 2 hours or less. In 1990, the ban on smoking was extended to virtually all domestic flights. On June 24, 1992, the Supreme Court ruled that the warning labels that appear on cigarette packs and advertisements are not sufficient to protect the tobacco industry against lawsuits. Injured smokers may now sue tobacco companies for concealing or falsifying scientific and medical data on the health risks of smoking. Individuals may also sue tobacco companies for conspiring to misrepresent or conceal this data. In 1992, another new development in the battle against nicotine was the circular nicotine skin patches. Each patch contains pure nicotine in a much smaller amount than is found in a cigarette. When you put it on your arm or torso, it slowly releases a 24-hour supply of nicotine into the bloodstream. Some patches come in graduated doses, allowing smokers to wean themselves from nicotine by applying successively smaller patches. The patches do reduce withdrawal symptoms and help some people quit smoking, but they don't treat the psychological addiction to smoking, which can be the hardest part of quitting. There are also side effects to using patches. More than 1/3 of the users experience burning and itchiness under the patches, sweating, diarrhea, a dry mouth, nervousness, insomnia, and muscle pain. Although there have not been any long-term studies, initial studies show that patches can double the success rate for quitters when combined with special counseling. In January 1993, the Environmental Protection Agency reported that secondhand cigarette smoke is a human carcinogen and kills about 3,000 non-smokers a year who die of lung cancer. The report also states that inhaling secondhand cigarette smoke increases the risk of pneumonia and bronchitis and middle ear disorders in children. It also increases the severity and frequency of asthma in children. A spokesman for the major anti-smoking organization says that the EPA's conclusions will likely motivate state governments and local governments to enact further regulations limiting smoking in public places. These findings could also lead OSHA to regulate smoking in the workplace. The EPA has a second report claiming that secondhand smoke is linked to 37,000 heart disease deaths a year, but the agency decided not to release this report. We ought to make our calls that they do release it. Archangel Joe Field's fiat was a dispensation for the United States of America, because in this nation, more than any other nation, people had already learned throughout this century how to call to the angels, the archangels, and the ascended masters for intercession. This is a key example of a prophecy that has come true and of the very physical presence of the work of angels in our midst. It shows what the angels can do when they have the backing of the people, scientific research, and a worldwide prayer force to back them up. And that is the key. You need to cooperate with angels to get the jobs done that we need to get done in our cities. You have free will. You can invite them in or shut them out. And most of us shut them out by neglect, by not taking every spare moment we have from walking here to there to make a fiat to the angels to rescue our youth. In 1955, 42% of Americans smoked cigarettes. Today, 25% of Americans smoke cigarettes. It's funny when you look at the old movies of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. You can see that smoking was really in style. All the great movie stars had a cigarette dangling from their mouths. You don't see it anymore. Americans have become aware of the problems associated with the cigarette habit, and the angels have delivered millions of them from this nasty addiction. At the same time, we can see on the nightly news that Europeans and those who have lived in Eastern Europe, former Soviet Union, and the Orient are still smoking pack after pack. This shows the power of a dispensation from God when it is released through any one of the 7 archangels and when we cooperate with it. But the battle has only begun. The rebel angels in embodiment, the spiritually wicked who occupy the high places of power, are outraged that Archangel Jophiel and his supporters have challenged them. For years they have moved among us, seeking unsuspecting souls whom they may devour with the help of the nicotine demons. They have now turned upon our children with a vengeance. Market studies show that most adult smokers get hooked before the age of 18. Many people believe that certain tobacco companies, such as R.J. Reynolds, specifically target minors in their advertising campaigns. In 1988, R.J. Reynolds introduced Old Joe Camel. Since then, Camel cigarette sales to minors have risen from $6 million a year to a current level of $476 million in cigarette sales to minors. This is in spite of the fact that cigarette sales to minors are illegal in 46 states. Concerned adults are now waging war to stop cigarette advertising in or near school buildings. In 1987, Archangel Jophiel pronounced the judgment of the worldwide tobacco industry, and we have been seeing the results. In January 1990, Canada banned all forms of tobacco print advertising and required manufacturers to phase out all store advertising and outside billboards by 1993. Canada's anti-smoking laws are among the most restrictive in the world. It's too bad they're not as serious about their gambling laws. In November 1992, legislation went into effect in France prohibiting smokers from smoking in offices, cafes, the metro, and other public places except in designated smoking areas. Those who break this law can face up to $260 in fines. Cafe, restaurant, hotel owners could be served up to $1,200 in fines if they fail to enforce the law. France has established the most restrictive anti-smoking laws in Europe. Other European community nations aren't far behind. In the last few years, they have also passed various laws that prohibit to some degree smoking in public places, such as on airplanes, on public transportation, in restaurants, and in the workplace. In order to make Jophiel's judgments complete for America and the world, we can give our decrees for the binding of the tobacco and nicotine entity. Especially should we direct our decrees on behalf of the protection of our children, to see that their growth is not stunted, and that the tobacco vibration, the nicotine in their brain, does not permanently destroy their capacity to be a chalice for the mind of God. Now I want to show you a picture of that entity. First of all, the nicotine entity is a non-physical being that lives by siphoning off the life energy of a physical being, the cigarette smoker. The entity resembles Manduca sexta, the tobacco worm, and that's the tobacco worm you are looking at. We're talking about a discarnate entity that is on the astral plane and that attacks individuals who are smokers and those who are candidates to become smokers. The tobacco worm is the scourge of tobacco growers' crops. I would like you to see how this worm entwines itself around the nicotine addict like a boa constrictor. This is a drawing I had done for an article published in The Coming Revolution in Higher Consciousness. Manduca sexta is the culprit. This is why it's so hard for people to kick the nicotine habit. The entity has a death grip on the brain and central nervous system. It transmits its desire for nicotine to its victim. It is this desire working through the nicotine residue in the body that binds people to the smoking habit. In addition, fallen angels multiply the autosuggestion, making the victim believe that the entity's projected desire is his own rather than that of the vicious force that it is. So you have a physical problem and you have an astral or psychic problem. I believe this is why people who've been addicted to heroin and other strong drugs still say that this is the hardest habit to break. Archangel Michael has given to us the opportunity to use his sword of blue flame to cut ourselves free from the attacks of entities of low vibration on the astral plane. So in this day and age, we need Archangel Michael, we need all the mighty archangels, and this sword is one more way that you can defend yourself from the rising of the astral sea. The astral sea is the astral plane. It's the lower vibrating level of consciousness in the earth. And because of the karma that people are making and the karma that is returning in this last decade of the century, the world is heavier, the world is darker. We see the last plagues coming upon the earth in the form of AIDS and other diseases. And so we need more protection. We need our tube of light, and we need the protection that Archangel Michael can afford us. There is a law that when you are on the path, God will not give you more light than you can protect. God doesn't want to give you light and then you are not protected and you lose your light by getting upset or provoked or out of sorts or whatever. Because when you get out of harmony, then you have a rent, a tear in your auric envelope, and so you can lose the light. So God says, I will only give you each day that portion of energy that you are able to protect. Well, we can't really protect ourselves. It is the angels who protect us. So the way you establish that protection is to call for the tube of light in the second page of the angel booklet. Call your tube of light around you as you see it on the chart behind me. And then you call to Archangel Michael to reinforce that protection by putting a cylinder of blue flame outside the tube of light. You can call this tube of light forth for everyone in your family, your loved ones. Why not maximize the call and call for that tube of light, violet flame in the center, and that cylinder of blue flame for every servant of God, every positive person, every light bearer on the planet. The archangels will take command and will protect people and save their lives. So the calls for protection are very basic and foundational when you are earnest on the path and earnest in your desire to accelerate and really get into passing the initiations of the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas. You can do this in this life. There's no question about it. Everyone is capable of doing it. It doesn't take a PhD to make his ascension. It takes a pure heart, a loving heart, and a real sense of love and communion with the angels, and that they are our helpers and that they are everywhere. So I would just want to show you what can happen when an archangel unleashes a spiral of light for a specific cause. Since Jophiel and Christine announced the coming of cosmic reinforcements of angels of the second ray, rotating decade upon decade, now is the time to call to them for illumination and for the absolute correction of the educational systems in our schools. There will be no golden age in America and on earth unless we have a literate America. If America cannot read, it cannot enter a golden age. It can't enter a golden age by watching video. hours and hours a day. It can't enter a golden age because it has a spelling check on its computer to do all the work of spelling correctly for it. We simply have to be able to read because we have to be able to study the path and the teachings of the great lights of East and West so that we can follow in their footsteps. The inability to read means that we are not able to overcome a ceiling of ignorance that is preventing our children from getting jobs because they are passed along through the grades, but they never pass their tests and their grades. So we are in such a crisis in America today as I can hardly tell you. And this is why our educational seminars are a part of both of these stumps that I am doing.
For more information on how angels can make a difference in your life, call toll-free 1-800-245-5445. The preceding program was presented by Summit University, Box 5000, Livingston, Montana, 59047 5000. If you'd like to know more, call this number or write this address. For a free book on the spiritual path, call 1-800-245-5445. That's 1-800-245-5445.